have a bonus episode for you. This is an interview with the founder of Coravin, who is our sponsor. This is a sponsored podcast. However, it is fascinating and one that you should not skip. Just as a review, Coravin was invented a few years ago. It is the first and the only tool that lets you pour your wine without removing the cork. So as Greg Lambrecht, who is the CEO and founder and inventor of Coravin, will tell you, he comes from a medical device background. And what he has created is based on his experience with needles and figuring out how to displace oxygen with argon gas. He has a lot of really great stories about how he came up with the invention. But basically what Coravin does is it allows you to pour any amount of wine and preserve what's left over in the bottle for weeks, months, or years. Thousands of wine professionals use it, sommeliers, winemakers. I use it. They trust Coravin with their wines. He's got some great stories about people in Burgundy and Bordeaux, Napa, all over the world using Coravin. And if you are interested in learning more about Coravin after the interview, please go to coravin.com. There's a special offer. You can enter normal at checkout. You get $20 off your purchase of $50 or more. So without further ado, let's get to this podcast, which is fascinating on so many levels, both from a wine perspective and also from an entrepreneurial perspective and an invention perspective. Here is Greg Lambrecht, the CEO of Coravin. Today we have on the show Greg Lambrecht. He's the inventor, founder, and board member of Coravin. He's also the founder of a lot of other amazing companies, medical device companies that address the needs of patients with spinal disorders. He's the founder of Viacor, a medical startup device company in Boston. And he has been in the medical device field for a very long time. He has a master's of science in mechanical engineering and a Bachelor of Science in nuclear engineering from MIT, and he has a bunch of patents. But today we are here to talk about Coravin. Thank you so much, Greg, for being on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Greg, I have to ask, your background is not wine. So could you talk about when you were younger? Were you a tinkerer always? Were you somebody always trying to find the solutions to problems?
Oddly, I was not really a tinkerer until I got into college. I've always been a really mission-driven guy. I've always needed some sort of target that I was rushing at 900 miles an hour from the time I was 4 or 5 years old. Something that was pretty common that stitched together my activities was, for whatever reason, I was always interested, and this is going to sound kind of corny, but I realized at a very young age that I was only on this planet for a relatively short period of time. And I remember deciding I'm going to do as much as I can to positively influence as many people's lives over the course of my lifespan as I can. I think I was, literally 4 or 5 when I made that decision. I've sort of been on that path ever since.
Wow. I've got a 5-year-old. I can't imagine my 5-year-old thinking that. That's pretty amazing.
It led to some weird behavior as a kid.
I'm sure. I mean, I just imagine that you've solved so many problems and you've come up with so many devices. I would just imagine you being one of these kids with like the Legos, fixing things and building things. And
I love Legos like everybody, but I try to think of something that typified the behavior of somebody who's mission driven. I remember feeling like it was a terrible injustice in kindergarten that all of us had to go to nap time, even if we weren't tired. And I remember actively organizing a coup against the teacher during nap time. And
oh my gosh.
Convinced 18 of the 22 kids to join me in the coup, but I wanted it to be unanimous. Right? It's going to better all of our lives.
Oh my gosh. That is hilarious.
Yeah.
So how did you get into wine? You were in the medical device field the whole time of your earlier career. So what about wine? Was it a hobby? Were you interested in the expertise of it? What was it?
It wasn't family. I think a lot of people get into wine because their parents drink it. My dad's a type 1 diabetic and so never drank alcohol. I was lucky with friends. I had some really good friends from high school that took me up to Napa Valley when we were young. I remember I walked into my first winery in Napa, and it was nothing then. It was brand new. It was their first vintage. It's actually Peju Winery, and Tony Peju was the guy that I met when I walked in the door. the founder. He had just made his first vintage. I remember walking up to the tasting counter and he poured me a glass of his Cabernet, and I took a sip and I looked at him and I said, "This is the best wine I've ever had." Of course, it was the first wine I'd ever had. But I realized, so he spent 45 minutes with me telling me about how wine was made and where all these different flavors came from, and when he harvested it and how he used oak. And I was just deeply fascinated by the stuff from the very first taste. As a Californian, I was sort of bigoted toward California wine. We make the best wine. And like many people who get into wine, I only drank red. Luckily, I ran into my wife in grad school, and her family's from Ohio, and they drink exclusively European wines. And so that exposed me to this whole new world. And then my brother-in-law exposed me to white Burgundy, and Riesling, which, convinced me to drink white wine. So it's been this sort of unfolding process that started from the moment I had it to now. And it's a hobby. I'm not trained in any way in wine. I never was. But it's a love and a fascination with this beverage. It's been with us for 8,000 years, all the variety of smells and flavors and all the ways that it accentuates sort of our social activity in life. The quality of life component that's become more and more indispensable.
Absolutely, and it's become more popular for a reason. So here's what I love about your story. As I've already told you, I have 2 children. Now, I did drink a little bit while I was pregnant, but the rest of the dads of the world just drank too much, drank skunky wine. Their wives are pregnant. They're not drinking. You invented Coravin instead. Like, that's what you decided to do while your wife was pregnant. How did this happen? I can just tell you, my husband's very smart, but he is not inventing something. He's just drinking old wine and being like, I can't believe you're not drinking, while I was pregnant. So how did it happen, and why did you become convinced you can make Coravin work? Tell us what Coravin is and why your love of wine, just kind of put it together for us.
Every invention is based on, is an attempt to address an unmet need. It's that moment of discovery of the need that I've found is pivotal in any of the inventions that I've done, whether it's in medicine or it's in Coravin. It's the person with the deepest understanding or a new perspective on the need. That's the true innovation. It's not necessarily the technology. That's just something that comes to address that need. But it's that understanding of the need. And mine was our second child, Lee was pregnant with. And Lee did not drink, my wife, during pregnancy. And so, this one person that I drank wine with on a regular basis now wasn't drinking. And we were kind of eclectic in our tastes, and Lee frequently didn't like the same wine that I liked. And so there was always a compromise going on. And I realized that there were all these times. So we used to split a bottle together on weekends when friends came over. And maybe we would open a wine that was inexpensive, that we didn't care about that much during the week, and we would have a couple of glasses over the course of the week. I realized that my consumption of wine was controlled by the volume it was sold to me. That as soon as I pulled the cork, that's 750 milliliters, sort of a random volume, probably based on the glass blowing capacity, right, in the 1800s. That was determining how much I drank. And I was like, why is that? I wanted to be able to have a perfect glass of wine every day, whatever I wanted.
Of anything you wanted.
Anything I wanted. And if my wife wanted a different wine, why not? Or if friends came over, the rate I was exploring wine, the way that I was serving wine, the way I was consuming wine was completely controlled by the volume it was sold. And it made sense in certain situations. It really didn't make sense in a bunch of others. So I'd worked on a chemotherapy delivery system that used needles, and it's normally used for kids with leukemia and other people with long-term cancer therapy. It's an implant under the skin, and you take a special needle called a non-coring needle, and you would go in and out of these implants over the course of somebody's therapy. So I got really good at making needles that didn't do damage to things when it went in and out. And I remember writing down my unmet needs statement. I said, a way to be able to drink from any bottle I own in any quantity I want, whenever I want, without having to think about when I'm going to drink from it again. And so then I wrote the next sentence, which was a way to drink wine from a bottle without opening it. And that is what reminded me of, these needles my dad had been using to give himself injections of insulin from the time I was a kid. He would go in and out of the bottle over and over again. And then this chemotherapy system, I said, hey, wait a minute, I can do that. I remember holding a bottle and the needle in my hand going, there's got to be a way I could get wine out of that bottle into my glass with this.
Ultimately, you use that needle to withdraw the wine, and that is what the Coravin system does, yes?
It is. I mean, it didn't work right away, and I had a day job. I'd quit.
Many day jobs.
I quit my large company job, and I loved this large company. They taught me a ton. To start my own medical device businesses. I founded 2 of them. So I was a busy guy. But every weekend I was home or when I wasn't traveling, I'd spend some time. I'd have a machine shop in my basement and I'd try to make prototypes. It wasn't that needle that was perfect. And actually, for 3 or 4 years, I experimented with the way the product works is it puts a needle through the cork. A non-cork needle is designed so that when you take it out of the cork reseals, just like it had never been opened. But now I needed a way to get the wine to want to leave the bottle. Normally, you'd suck it out. That creates a vacuum that sucks the wine right back in. So I realized I had to push it out of the bottle and into my glass. And so I needed something to push it out with. So I use a gas, argon, which is one of the noble gases like helium. It has no impact on flavor or smell. And I push that gas into the bottle, which pushes the wine out. So the wine is actually displaced by an inert gas that takes its space so that no oxygen gets in during pouring. Sounds simple. It took me 3 or 4 years of nights and weekends to experiment with it, with some funny failures along the way.
Well, tell us some of the funny failures. I bet you have some great stories.
Yeah, I mean, one was sort of the gas that everybody thinks about, noble gas, is helium, right? So the first gas I tried, which my sons loved, we all breathed most of it.
Of course.
Right? Yeah. But helium is so light that as soon as you tip the bottle back up to vent the extra gas, all the helium leaves and it'll suck air in, so the wine oxidizes counterintuitively. And if you pull the needle out really quickly, it wouldn't leave and suck air in, but it would actually then leak through the cork. It's such a small molecule. And I remember my son went downstairs with this small rack of wine, and he's like, "Dad, the corks are inside the bottle, and there's wine leaking all over the floor."
Oh, shoot.
Then the other one that was pretty crazy, the very first time I assembled a needle, a valve, and a gas, and I was there with my son, and tiny little needle, so I was resting the bottle on a table. I had the glass positioned below, and I stuck the needle through the cork and pressed the valve, and I was going to pour wine into the glass. 3 things happened all at once. One, that my chest hurt. There was this purple cloud, and I heard a smash. And it turns out if you put 2,600 pounds per square inch of gas into a bottle, all sorts of bad things happen. So when I was recovering, my son was looking at me going, "Do it again."
You're like, never. Thank you.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Turns out you need a regulator. So Coravin is a regulator. And net pressure never gets above 20 pounds, 23 pounds per square inch. So.
And you figured that out through much pain.
Trial and error.
So were you ever worried? I know some people have brought this up before, and I have to admit that when I first saw the device, this is the first thing I thought of people reverse engineering it. Because with this Rudy Kearney one, have you kept up with any of the wine fraud stuff? It's so amazing. Yeah. I mean, where they're replacing wine inside the bottle. Did that ever worry you?
It came up. It didn't worry me. I mean, when I originally developed Coravin, it was just for my own consumption. And I've spent, as my wife will remind me, 11 years testing it. And I never thought of it during the testing. And I think Kearney one came out after I founded the company. I did run into it in Bordeaux. I went to Bordeaux, and wine is 8,000 years old. It's got a lot of traditions. And if you're going to launch a new technology into a potentially very resistant market to change, I thought about it very consciously. I'm going to go to the winemakers. I'm going to show the product to them before we launch. I'm going to go to the top restaurants, the top sommeliers, show it to them before we launch. Because ultimately, we use our product on theirs. And I wanted to make sure that they were comfortable with it. So I was in Napa and Spain and Italy and France and Burgundy and Bordeaux.
I'm sure they were pretty open to it in Napa, right?
Napa, very, right? I mean, Australian, same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, because the New World is so much more technology focused, but I'm amazed. I'd be interested to hear what Bordeaux said. And Burgundy, too,
I was worried about Burgundy, but it was one of the most moving experiences of my life. Our first winemaker I met now has retired, and he runs one of the top white Burgundy producers. He actually owned more Grand Cru vineyards in Burgundy than anybody else. And I was brought there by a master of wine. He's like, "You got to meet this guy." At first, and he's a tall, stately, elderly gentleman. And I walked in, in panic that here's this defender of the tradition, long line of family behind him, and I'm going to show him this crazy tool. I walked in, met him, poured a glass of wine for him using Coravin to demonstrate it, and he looked at me and he said, "Can you wait here a second?" And I said, "Sure." He disappears. He comes back with this bottle, and he goes, "This is the last wine that my mother made. Can we try your device on this?" He's like, "I don't have much of it left." and I want to know what it tastes like.
Oh, God.
It was, I was almost in tears.
But also a little frightening, no?
Wine was great.
I bet it was, but I bet you were like, gosh, this better not fail me right now.
By then I knew that it worked.
Right.
But Burgundy accepted it immediately. They have small production and very expensive wines. So they can't afford to pull quarts all the time. So they've been big supporters of ours. Bordeaux was much more conservative. And it was the very first question I got. How is this going to be used for counterfeiting? They were the most resistant to Coravin. They've since come around. It's been 5 or 6 years since we launched. And what convinced them was, the way that people counterfeit very successfully is they make the bottle, they make the label, they make the cork for a couple of bucks.
Right.
And they make it in the thousands. It's not a good business model to buy the bottle, drink the wine, refill it, and sell the bottle because, you don't make a profit. You just drink the wine and it's traceable. So Cornelius got caught, right? Because he got caught, interestingly, not because of a bottle that he had drained and then refilled. He got caught because of a bottle that never existed that he made. So he had magnums. Right. The winemaker was like, I never made that wine. So people have come around and realized that, number one, it's really hard to reverse engineer Coravin and to fill a bottle. And there are easier ways to do it, which I won't discuss. That's not how people counterfeit.
No, absolutely. I just wanted to address it because it was something I was curious about when I first saw it. That was one of the things that I thought about. Maybe just because I drink a lot of Bordeaux. Maybe I'm a Bordelaise at heart.
It's good stuff.
I gotta ask. And I entered the wine industry after working in high tech market research, and I found it to be a very odd place. It is one of the strangest industries. The structure doesn't make much sense. What surprised you about entering the wine industry, and what do you think of it now, just being sort of an outsider who's come into it?
So I got to say, I knew nothing about the wine industry. I met some winemakers in Napa. That was it when I founded Coravin. So it was all brand new. That's the best
side of the industry.
Oh boy, I couldn't agree more.
Yep.
If you're going to enter the wine industry, Coravin is a great way to do it. We have no enemy. And we're used across the industry. We're used by wine stores to do sampling. We're used by wineries to test their own wines, to serve their guests who come by. We're used by restaurants to serve any wine by the glass. We're used at home. And we're used by the trade. So I didn't know anything about it. Number one, wine is made in beautiful places by wonderful people. So I am a fanatic wine tourist now. I love, and if you're a wine consumer and you're even new in wine consumption, get to the vineyards, meet the people, taste the wines with them. One of the beautiful things about wine is it locks a memory. It really accentuates the memory, and I think there's something having to do with the way that it smells and tastes that if you connect that to a place and people, it forever links you to that wine, and for good reason. That's just a beautiful thing that was confirmed by Coravin and my actions in the industry. The weirdest part is the way that wine is sold. The distribution of wine from wineries into restaurants and wine stores is crazy, and it varies by. The United States is the craziest, but Bordeaux is pretty weird.
They've got so many layers, the courtiers and the négociants, everything.
It's nuts. You would never design it this way, and it's clearly evolved. I suffer from the layers of cost that are associated with that as a consumer, which is ultimately what I am. But Coravin really changed those people's lives. The group of people that we influenced dramatically that I never even knew existed are the wine distributors. Those guys used to schedule their day around when they were opening a particular bottle because they had to make sure they got to all the restaurants and wine stores they needed to get to before it started to oxidize. We've totally changed that because they use it to sample their customers. That was, it was interesting to meet those guys and see how that part of the business is being done. But wow, it's been great to be used by them as well. They're an important part of our customer base.
Do you think that not being in the industry helped you with innovation? Because had you known all of the barriers and weird stuff inside of the industry, it might have been more frustrating, or does it not matter?
It doesn't matter to me. Mission-driven guy.
Yeah, that's right. That's true.
But right, going to take over that kindergarten class one of these days.
Can you take over the wine industry and fix that too?
Oh, no. No, wine is only fun. Core to my ability to invent is that ability to identify unmet needs. I don't think it would have been possible for me to do what I've done and invent Coravin if I was inside the industry. You develop so many biases after being in an industry for a while. You lose the ability to see the problems in a new way. I've never invented in the same field twice.
Wow.
I love going into a new field of medicine. I love going into the wine industry and just taking a new perspective and saying, what's wrong here? What are the things that we've all accepted as okay, or that this industry has accepted as okay, that we could change and make everybody's lives better? I think being unbiased, innocent, unaware allows you an easier time to invent. It's actually part of my theory about why young people start so many companies nowadays in the United States. They just don't know. They don't know how hard it is, and they're brand new exposed to whatever the problem is and can bring a new insight.
Yes, that's definitely true. Okay, let's get back to the device. So how has it improved over the years? Your latest version is pretty much flaw-free. I know it's always been really good, but how has it gotten better over the years? And how do you improve it? Or do you rely on other people to improve it because you did it first? How does that work? And I am curious, we talked about argon gas. So everyone uses argon. And you could get the sprays and you could spray that over, and that doesn't seem to work out so well. So is it always going to be argon? Is that the solution? I know some of the sprays, I think, do affect the wine after a while. You're not putting in that much. What's the improvements in Coravin over the years? You have many versions now.
So I'll start with sort of our core mission statement. We want to change the way that wine is served and sold around the world, and do that by expanding the ways rather than deleting them. So that was sort of my dream when we started the company. And I remember writing down, Coravin should be faster, easier, and more fun than opening a bottle. And it should work independent of closure, and it should be still or sparkling. When we've done all of those things, we're done.
You got a little ways to go.
Yeah, exactly, a little ways to go. So I'm still employed. So that has always been our sort of guiding light. We've made improvements to get there. So the first one I made sort of looked like a weapon. And was really hard to use. And we launched in 2013 with our very first system, and you still see a lot of them out there, which is great. We made it easier to use. We have a clamp that attaches to the bottle. We made that a whole lot easier to use. We've made improvements and refinements in the needle that allow us to use the same size needle and get a faster flow and use less gas to do so, which is great. We have not changed the gas. I tested helium, as you know, carbon dioxide,
yes.
Nitrogen, and argon. The downside of carbon dioxide is it smells bad and it goes into the wine and it stays there. Interestingly, nitrogen, while it doesn't have a smell, does dissolve in wine. And a Guinness beer, for example, is nitrogenated, those small bubbles. And so it actually makes the wine taste a little flat. Now, it leaves the wine eventually. So nitrogen is the second best gas and will preserve wine over a long period of time. But argon doesn't dissolve in fluid, doesn't stay in the fluid, so you can't argonate wine. It is inert, no smell, no taste, noble gas, and it's readily available. So I don't think we're ever going to change from argon for still wines. It really is great. No, spray cans are pretty good. The reason why those spray cans don't work is that when you take the bottle and you tip it to pour, you're going glug, 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 and that's letting oxygen into the bottle, which mixes with the wine. And then you spray the argon in there. There's part air, part argon now in the bottle, and you close the bottle, and that air will eventually dissolve into the wine and oxygenate it. So that's why that doesn't work.
It winds up tasting real funky, like weirder than if you hadn't sprayed it in. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And so
I guess that that's interesting because I've always attributed the argon to having some sort of flavor because every time I've ever used the sprays, the wine winds up tasting icky.
Yeah, and that's actually the admixture of air during pouring.
Interesting.
The beauty of Coravin is argon goes in and pushes the wine out, no air ever gets in. And we've done, the way that I developed it and confirmed that it worked was I did these blind tastings with myself where I pick a bottle that I Coravin weeks, months, years ago, up to 5 years during my development. And I would blind taste it against a bottle from the same case. We'd pour 4 glasses. I don't know which one or how many of them are from the Coravin bottle. And then when I was passing that with wines from all over the world and different vintages, I knew that it worked. And we've actually now just done a 14-year blind tasting in my cellar.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's crazy. Great, inexpensive Spanish wine. That still tastes fantastic. And I couldn't tell the difference between Coravin bottle and the control. And I've done that test now with out to 5 years with winemakers, their own wines, the top sommelier in the world. And they also don't recognize which ones are the Coravin. So argon doesn't have an effect on the flavor. So we're gonna stay with that.
Yep.
In terms of what we're going to make better, we launched, thank you for the compliment on the latest one. It's a labor of love. We have an amazing team at Coravin, and nothing gets done. You can invent something, but being an entrepreneur means you hire a great team. And we have, in order to make that invention available and spread across the world and positively influence people. So that only results from an amazing team. We have an unbelievable R&D team here, really remarkable marketing team as well. I mean, there are a lot of really great people here. So they came up with this idea of using a small computer and battery to pour wine automatically, and it's Bluetooth connected to your phone. So it's still like Coravin, they all fit in your hand. They leave nothing behind but the gas. You buy one, you can pour from every bottle you've got. But the beautiful thing about the Model 11 is, you push the needle through the cork, you grab the bottle naturally, tip it sideways, it starts pouring itself. And
right.
you can set the volume of pour on your phone. We have our own app, which is great. It not only controls the Coravin, but we did a deal with Delectable. You can take a photograph of your wine label, upload it into a virtual cellar. We're pairing wines that you have and like with food, with movies, with music. We're trying to accentuate that moment in advance and say, hey, if you're going to be watching a movie and eating this food with friends, this is the wine that pairs with that movie or with this music or that food. It's been a lot of fun. So I think the app side of what we do is going to be evolving very rapidly. I think it's already, Coravin Moments is what it's called, already the coolest wine app out there. And then, from what we will do from here, I still dream so we've launched Screw Cap. I'm going to have dinner actually with an Australian winemaker tonight.
How is that going to work?
So I developed it in Australia with the Australians. They're 90-something% Screw Cap guys now. So you do need to open the bottle. So you crack the bottle open and you place the Coravin Screw Cap on top. It's got these chemotherapies that I was talking about and my dad's insulin.
Yeah.
So we have a really pure version of silicone rubber that's at the top of this Coravin screw cap and a wine liner underneath to prevent oxidation, and you can puncture straight through that like it was a cork.
It's sort of like the insulin thing you were talking about with your dad, right? Those vials?
Exactly. In fact, the silicone provider is the same provider I use for my implant under the skin for chemotherapy delivery. It's remarkable how that all comes around. Needle maker is
it
same
is,
needle
but
maker.
seriously, only you could think of this because somebody in the wine industry could never have that kind of access to innovation, I think.
Yeah.
And I mean, the whole idea about the needles is amazing, and the needle technology that you're familiar with and the improvements in the technology. I actually think I have a lot of friends who are distributors. I think the Coravin has done a better job preserving over the years. I think the first model, I know you're saying it's exactly the same, but the first model was very good, but subsequent models have done, I think they're really amazing.
Thank you.
Again, I don't know if it's just me or whatever, but I think there's no change
now. Yeah, and it's a labor of love and by a lot of people. Our manufacturer is amazing. Our partners are amazing. The fact that the winemakers are willing to do blind tastings.
Well, and that you keep at it. People would just say, okay, well, we have this. We're just going to keep going with it. We'll make it prettier and we'll do this. But I think that you're actually looking at the device and saying, can we make it a little bit better? Can we replace a little bit less gas? Or can we change the pouring just a tiny bit to make it better? Those incremental changes in wine are incredibly important. Just a tiny bit of change can make an enormous difference in wine, in my opinion.
Yeah. And we believe the same about Coravin. I mean, you're going to see a bunch of amazing improvements going forward. I mean, we're still faster, easier, more fun, really trying to perfect it. And for my wife, what's really important is that still her sparkling phrase. She wants to be able to go to a restaurant and look through a list of 14 sparkling wines by the glass.
Yeah, that would be great.
And so kind of important to solve that. So wine's going to be a part of my life forever. And if Coravin can continue to accentuate, optimize, expand my ability to explore, learn about this beverage that constantly changes. I mean, and then allow everybody else. One thing that struck me, going back to one of your earlier questions, if you think about, this is the weirdest thing in wine, if you think about how a wine store sells you wine, imagine a shoe store coming to you and saying, this is a $125 pair of shoes, but I'm not going to let you try it. You're not going to put them on.
Right.
And in fact, I'd like you to buy them and not drink them for about a year, maybe 2, when they're ready to wear. I mean, how crazy would that be? And I realized that when I was in a wine store and somebody was trying to sell me an expensive bottle of Italian wine, I'm like, and I can't taste it? or I've got to come on like a Thursday in 3 weeks when you're going to open 4 of the bottles on your schedule. One of my dreams with Coravin was to have wine stores sample you on a wine before you buy it. And we're seeing it more and more now. Total Wine and Spirits, for example, there's a great wine store, Urban Grape, here in Boston that's been doing this forever. There's another one in France and Spain, La Viña, that will let you try almost anything. And it sort of changes the relationship between the wine store and the consumer.
Well, the trust level just goes up.
Yeah, and you know you like it. Right. You tasted it. You're like, oh, great.
Absolutely.
I'll take 3, right?
Well, I think it's an interesting point, because one of the trends that we're seeing in the industry is that younger generations are drinking less wine, but they're drinking better wine.
Yeah.
And it seems like this is a perfect window for Coravin to be a device that's on more tables. I think, would you ever see a range where there would be a less expensive one that might preserve less well? So
first of all, on the younger generation, I think they are one of the best things for the wine industry. The younger, and I've got a 23-year-old son, the younger generation is less biased toward one or another particular region. They want to explore. So, you're seeing wines from Greece and Slovenia and Croatia, places that were never commonly available wines they love exploring. And there's more better wine being made now around the world than ever before in wine's history. And the millennials want to explore that range more than almost anybody else. And so for me, one of the advantages of Coravin was the ability to explore faster and learn faster, because I didn't have to commit to the whole bottle. So you could buy 6 different wines from 6 different regions, taste, and then put them wherever you store your wine and drink them again whenever. So we've had a very positive response from the younger generation of wine consumers, and I think for the right reasons. In terms of less expensive, we already have a pretty broad range of prices, and our entry level Model 1 preserves just as well as our most expensive Model 11, the self pouring. And you'll see us, as we increase in volume, try to decrease the cost of our system. And we've already decreased the cost of our gas. As we order more from our suppliers, that allows us to drop costs to our consumer. Yeah, supply and demand. That's right. It's great when you start. We're now available in 70 countries. Oh, that's fantastic. Wine is produced and consumed globally. It's a remarkable unifying beverage. Not to go too far afield, but it's a winemaker in Burgundy we were talking about why wine was with us for 8,000 years. And he said, it's the most social beverage. And it struck me as so true. I think one of the other reasons is it's infinitely variable. There's at least 140,000 different wines bottled every year. And it changes every year it's in bottle. So you have an infinite potential variety of experience that'll never stop. It's a fascination, like with music. There'll always be new music. That is part of that sort of permanent fascination. I think it's the combination of the social and this infinite palate that makes it such a special beverage. And it's great to see the younger generation. I think it's an interesting thing, not to go too far off on, I don't know how much you read about the industry, but so many people are doing, the sky is falling, Generation Z is not drinking as much, millennials are not drinking as much, the wine industry is going to fall apart, everything is going to pot. The industry rags, this is literally what they are indicating. And I say the same thing that you just said, which is that this beverage has been around for 8,000 years. If the pie shrinks, it will not shrink that much. And people understand that ultimately wine is a very different beverage, even from beer, and that it is something that is incredibly social. Sometimes you will want to open the whole bottle so everybody can have a glass, and sometimes you will want to have one really special glass. And I think Coravin makes that possible. My husband has just cut back a little bit because he's worried about his blood sugar levels and things like that. And I have been using the device because I can drink what I want, when I want. And it has made an enormous difference in my life. And I think everyone sort of needs to have this around, because one of the other things I was thinking about, at the end of the night, you have friends over and you want one last glass. You've already opened your bottles and there's one last glass and you really would like to have that, maybe like a glass of port or something like that. And you can have it with the Coravin. It is infinitely social, right? Yeah, thank you for that. And I had a couple come up, one of the weirdest things, and the guy hugs me and he goes, "You saved my marriage."
It helps. It really helps. You don't realize it's going to be a problem until one person starts cutting back.
Yeah, and the other one that I hear the most often is when I ask people, what do you use it for? They said, perfect glass of wine every day.
Yep.
There's that perfect glass somewhere. I used to open a bad bottle of wine during the week and toss most of it. When it went bad, he said, I no longer do that. I have whatever I want.
Or a special glass when you want it.
It's a moment, because that movie Psalm, I've gotten to know most of the people in that movie just through Coravin, and Ian Cobble has this opening line that's so true about it's that time that you have with yourself, the opportunity to sit there and concentrate on something that is not your work and not your family. And it's this special thing. It's in a glass. It smells great, tastes great, has all this history, and is relaxing. If Coravin can make that relaxing moment more accessible and more perfect and precise, you're only alive for a certain period of time. And why drink bad wine? Why compromise the moment? It's what you want when you want. And you sort of see that with the way that we now listen to music. Right? We used to listen to a whole album. Now we listen to a playlist. We used to go out to see movies or watch what was on television when the schedule passed. Now
that blows my kids' minds, by the way. Every time I tell them that, they're like, "What?"
The world has gotten a better. It's not just a jet plane, right?
It's just amazing. Yeah, we've definitely become very demand driven, but I think in some ways maybe that's not great, but I think with wine it certainly is, because we're talking about these small producers in Burgundy and Bordeaux. They don't want you not to enjoy the wine. They don't want it to be in a mausoleum. They want you to drink it. And this allows you to do that and allows you to do it when you want to. So I think it's fantastic. So what is on the horizon is just continuous improvement. You guys are going to keep going, and you're going to figure out the sparkling thing, or else your marriage might be up.
Exactly. I will be secretly clubbed to death with an empty champagne bottle.
Greg, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. I really enjoyed the conversation.
I did too. And
we got to meet and have a glass.
Absolutely. Well, like I said, my sister lives in Brookline, so I'll have to come up. You're in Boston, right?
I am indeed.
Well, we'll have to have a glass at some point. Maybe I'll probably be up there for a book event. I'm launching a book in November. So
congratulations.
We will see you then. But thank you so much. This has been great. And everybody, get your Coravin today. You can go to Coravin.com and enter normal at checkout. You get $20 off your purchase of $50 or more. This is an excellent investment for all of us. So Coravin.com, enter normal at checkout. Do it. Greg, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was really a pleasure.
Okay, with that, this has been another episode of Wine for Normal People, and we will catch you next time.